Have you ever felt a deep invisible ache, one that you couldn't explain but that somehow never leaves, like a silence beneath your laughter or a shadow behind your every success? What if I told you that this pain isn't random, that it's not weakness, not bad luck, not failure, but a coded message from the universe designed to wake you up? Carl Jung believed that pain is the voice of the unconscious, a sacred signal from the depths of your psyche, calling you back to your truth. And what if that heartbreak, that burnout, that persistent emptiness you've tried to numb, is actually the first step of your spiritual awakening? What if the very thing you've been trying to escape is the key to your freedom? Today, you're going to uncover a truth that most people never dare to face. Your pain is a portal. It holds the map to your transformation, your purpose, your wholeness. Through Jung's mystical lens and the power of analytical psychology, we're going to explore how your suffering, your patterns and your emotional shadows are not accidents, but invitations, symbols, whispers from the universe guiding you back to yourself. And if you've been feeling lost, disconnected, or stuck in loops you can't explain, this video was made for you. Because what you'll discover today could change the way you see your entire existence. You won't find religious promises here, only the raw, powerful truth that your healing is already within you. This is your chance to remember who you really are, beyond the noise, beyond the roles, beyond the masks. But before we begin, I need to ask you something important. Are you subscribed to Celestial Truths? So many souls visit our content and feel a deep connection, but forget to join the journey. Don't miss out on the revelations that can realign your entire life. Hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications, because what we're about to explore might just awaken something ancient within you. There are moments in life when pain arrives uninvited, crashing into our existence like a thunderstorm that knows no mercy. And yet, according to the wisdom whispered through Carl Jung's teachings, pain is not chaos. It is a divine signal from the unconscious, a spiritual knock on the door of the soul. It comes not to punish, but to awaken. When we stray too far from who we truly are, the universe doesn't remain silent. It speaks in discomfort, in that subtle restlessness, in the ache behind our smiles. Pain is the soul's way of saying, "Come back home." It's a mystical invitation to descend from the noise of the outside world and step into the silent temple within. So many people live caught in the web of external pursuits, chasing careers, relationships, approval, wealth, believing these things will fill the inner void. But no matter how much they achieve, something still feels off. That's not coincidence. That's soul sickness. When we live disconnected from our essence, pain becomes our guide. It strips away illusions, forces stillness, and gently, or not so gently, redirects our gaze inward. The universe, in its infinite spirituality, uses symbolic language: a breakup, a burnout, an illness, or a series of failures. Each one isn't a curse, but a message, a sacred hint. Are you paying attention? The unconscious speaks through symptoms, through dreams that disturb your sleep, through the anxiety that flares up during silence, through the patterns you swore you'd never repeat. Pain is the sacred pressure that urges you to stop abandoning yourself. It asks, where have you betrayed your truth? When did you stop listening to your inner voice? In the mystical landscape of the psyche, nothing is random. Everything is encoded with meaning, but only those brave enough to stop running will hear the message behind the suffering. When you see pain not as punishment, but as a coded message from your soul, everything shifts. The ordinary becomes spiritual. The darkness becomes a passage. To embrace this perspective is to walk the path of the seeker. A seeker doesn't numb the pain. They listen to it. They sit with it. They write it out. They meditate upon it. They track the signs the universe leaves like breadcrumbs in their daily life. Maybe it's that recurring number, a dream you keep forgetting but always comes back, or a phrase someone random says that feels strangely familiar. These are not coincidences. Jung called them synchronicities, the mystical alignments that happen when your soul is calling you deeper. Pain in this light is sacred, it's the gateway, and often it's only when everything falls apart that we're finally ready to hear what's been whispering inside us all along. But the journey doesn't stop at recognizing pain as a sign. That's just the first veil lifted. The next question is, what lies beneath it. And that's where we must venture into the shadows, into that place where we've buried what we couldn't accept, where the unconscious stores all that we've hidden, not just from the world but from ourselves. Pain is the guide, but the shadow is the terrain. And so we now begin to explore what we've long feared, the darker parts of our being that still hold the key to our wholeness. There is a part of you, ancient, hidden, and often feared, that holds the very essence of your unclaimed self. Jung called it the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it is unconscious, cast behind you like a silhouette when you walk toward the light. It contains every thought, impulse, emotion, and truth you've been told you shouldn't feel. And so over time, you learn to suppress your anger, silence your insecurities, mask your envy, deny your desires. But the unconscious does not forget. What the ego disowns, the soul remembers. The universe stores nothing in vain, not even the parts of you you wish didn't exist. The shadow isn't your enemy. It is your twin, raw, unfiltered, brutally honest. It shows itself in subtle ways, in the jealousy that flares when a friend succeeds, in the judgment you cast without reason, in the self-sabotage that appears when you're close to something good. These aren't moral failures, they're signals. Spirituality is not just about light, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness includes what's dark, wounded, rejected. To walk the mystical path is to retrieve what you've buried, not to indulge it, but to understand it. The shadow only harms when it stays unconscious. Once brought to light, it becomes one of your greatest sources of power. But integrating the shadow is not a concept, it's a practice. It begins in the quiet moments, journaling after a difficult conversation, noticing what emotions arise when someone disagrees with you, paying attention to dreams where you're chased, falling, or acting out of character. These symbols are not random, they're messages from your inner world, encrypted with meaning. The universe, in its sacred design, doesn't waste anything. Even your darkest impulses have something to teach. To face the shadow is not to become less spiritual, but more. Because only then are you no longer split, no longer living a double life between your inner truth and your outer performance. Most people are afraid of the shadow because it holds the parts of themselves they believe will make them unlovable. But paradoxically, the more you deny your darkness, the more it controls you. Jung warned, what we do not make conscious emerges in our life as fate. That's why people repeat the same conflicts, attract similar partners, sabotage their own growth. It's not coincidence. It's unconscious repetition. And so, integrating the shadow is not just a mystical act, it's a liberation. It frees your energy, your creativity, your ability to love without projection. You stop needing to pretend, you become real. And the universe always supports what is real. As you continue this inward journey, you'll begin to notice patterns, those strange repetitions in your life that seem too precise to be accidents. That's where the unconscious begins to speak in full sentences, through the fabric of your experience. These patterns are not random, and neither are they cruel. They are doorways, and if you have the courage to walk through them, you may discover that what you called a curse was in fact your initiation. And so, we now enter the sacred spiral of repetition, the soul's attempt to awaken you through patterns that beg to be understood. Have you ever wondered why certain situations keep resurfacing in your life, almost like echoes from a past you thought you'd outgrown? The same kind of relationship, the same internal crisis, the same aching sense of emptiness that visits you in silence. This isn't bad luck, it's not punishment. It's the universe repeating a lesson your soul has yet to learn. Jung understood this profoundly. When we avoid looking within, the unconscious finds its own way to speak. Through patterns, life becomes symbolic. Every repetition is a mystical mirror, reflecting something you haven't yet faced. The message is subtle at first, then louder, then inescapable. There's a sacred rhythm in the universe, and it doesn't waste energy. The soul calls for wholeness, and what remains unhealed will continue to seek your attention until it's integrated. These patterns aren't here to hurt you, they're here to awaken you. Just as the tide returns again and again to the shore, your psyche returns to unfinished business. The relationship that starts with passion and ends in pain. The dream that always slips away at the peak. The goal that remains out of reach. These are clues, cosmic breadcrumbs. Each one whispers, "Look closer." In the mysticism of the unconscious, repetition is never random, it is ritual in disguise. When we begin to notice these cycles with awareness, we start to decode the language of the psyche. This is where spirituality meets psychological depth. The analytical mind might say, "It's just coincidence," but the soul knows better. You are part of a living, breathing universe that speaks in symbols and signs, and when a lesson repeats, it is because the soul is still calling for integration. Jung taught that we attract people, situations, and challenges not by chance, but by the magnetic pull of our own unconscious material. What you haven't healed, you will attract. What you haven't faced, you will relive until you wake up. To awaken is to break the cycle, not by force but by recognition. A seeker does not flee from patterns, they study them. They track them like sacred maps drawn across time. A failed relationship becomes a reflection of unresolved wounds. A fear of abandonment echoes a forgotten childhood experience. A sabotaged opportunity reveals a hidden belief that says, "I am not worthy." This is shadow work in action, not mystical escapism, but the grounded, transformative process of reclaiming your lost parts. And as you begin to bring awareness to the unconscious, the patterns shift, the loops unravel, and the universe, sensing your readiness, opens new paths. But this unraveling is not the end. It's only the next layer. Because once you recognize the patterns, a deeper challenge emerges. Facing your own vulnerability, the patterns weren't just teaching you. They were protecting you from the very pain you now have to feel in full. And so, the journey continues. Not through resistance, but through surrender. Through allowing the heart to soften. Through embracing what you once feared to admit, that being open, uncertain, even afraid, is not weakness. It's the beginning of real strength. And so we now walk toward a sacred paradox, where true power begins with vulnerability. In a world that glorifies control, perfection, and emotional armor, vulnerability has been tragically misunderstood. It's often seen as a flaw, a crack in the mask, something to hide, suppress, or overcome. But within the depths of Carl Jung's philosophy, and in the wisdom of the universe itself, vulnerability is not weakness. It is initiation. It is the sacred door through which the soul re-enters your life. To be vulnerable is to stand naked before your own truth, stripped of defenses, illusions, and egoic performances. It's the moment the seeker finally says, "I don't know." And in that admission, something ancient and mystical begins to awaken. You see, the unconscious doesn't speak to the persona, that social facade we wear to be accepted, admired, or untouched. It speaks to the self, and the self is raw, real, tender. Vulnerability is the only state in which the universe can truly meet you. When the heart is open, even if it's trembling, life rushes in with messages, synchronicities, and revelations. Pain becomes teacher. Tears become purification. The masks you've worn for years begin to fall, and what emerges is not shame, but soul. It takes far more strength to feel than to suppress, far more courage to break than to pretend you're unbreakable. This mystical truth reveals itself in the smallest of moments. When you admit you're lost, when you confess you're scared, when you say, "I need help." These acts, so simple on the surface, are spiritual revolutions within. Jung believed that true healing requires exposure to the contents of the unconscious, and that cannot happen through denial. Only when the seeker surrenders to their own fragility does the shadow soften, revealing its teachings. Vulnerability is the fertile soil where the psyche begins to grow in new, authentic directions. And when you stop resisting your sensitivity, you begin to realize it was never your enemy. It was your compass all along. Letting go of control feels terrifying at first. After all, we've been taught that strength is about independence, certainty, dominance. But spiritual strength is something different. It is not loud. It is not rigid. It is presence. It is the ability to sit in silence with your fear and say, "I'm still here." It's the mystical resilience that arises not from avoidance but from connection. The universe doesn't reward masks. It responds to essence. Vulnerability aligns you with that essence. It's the sacred act of returning to the self, of no longer performing for the world but becoming real within it. That's when you start attracting not what you want, but what you truly need. And yet, As this doorway opens, another truth is revealed. Vulnerability alone is not enough. It must be channeled through the process of individuation, because once you've dared to be real, once you've stood in your naked truth, the next question arises: who are you beneath all that was once a performance? What does it mean to truly be yourself, without needing to be anything for anyone? And so the journey continues, now not just into your depths, but toward your wholeness. You are ready to meet the self, not as a concept, but as a living force calling you toward your own becoming. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the roles they've played begin to feel hollow. The laughter doesn't echo like it used to, the goals lose their luster, and the life once built with such conviction begins to crumble under the weight of an unspoken truth. This is not who I really am. Jung named this moment the beginning of individuation, the sacred process of becoming your truest self. It's not about becoming someone new, but about returning to the self you've always been beneath the masks, the conditioning and the unconscious agreements. Individuation is not a choice, it's a calling. And when it begins, the universe rearranges everything to support your transformation. This mystical path doesn't unfold in a straight line. It is spiral, paradoxical, and often disorienting. One day you feel illuminated, the next you confront your deepest shadows. That's how the soul grows, not in comfort but in truth. To individuate is to confront the difference between your image and your essence. The image seeks approval, success, control. The essence seeks meaning, authenticity, alignment with the universe. You'll feel the tension between them in every decision that no longer resonates, every relationship that no longer fits, every role you once wore like armor that now feels suffocating. The old self dies, not with violence, but with grace. This death is sacred. Jung compared it to alchemy, a psychological transmutation where the ego is dissolved and the self begins to emerge. You start to question everything, your values, your path, your desires, and in that questioning, you open a dialogue with the unconscious. Dreams become vivid, synchronicities increase. The world begins to feel like a living symbol, reflecting your inner state. Spirituality becomes less about doctrines and more about direct experience. It's in these moments of deep questioning that you begin to sense something timeless guiding you, an intelligence greater than logic, a mystical thread woven through your existence. But individuating requires courage. It means leaving behind the security of imitation to walk the uncertain terrain of your own truth. It means saying no to the expectations others placed upon you. It means disappointing people in order to honor your soul. And yet in this solitude you begin to feel truly alive. For the first time, you're not reacting. You're responding from a place of inner knowing. You no longer follow paths handed to you. You carve your own. And in doing so, you re-establish your connection with the universe. You realize that to be who you are is not selfish. It's your spiritual responsibility. Still, individuation is not a destination. It's a living process, a lifelong dance between integration and emergence. You'll find yourself circling back to wounds you thought were healed, only to uncover deeper layers. But with each cycle, you become more whole, more radiant, more you. And as this deeper self begins to emerge, your relationships change too, because now you no longer seek others to complete you, but to mirror what's already been discovered. And so the path leads us forward, not alone, but with new eyes, ready to see others not as saviors or threats, but as sacred reflections of what we still hold within. No mirror reflects us as clearly as another human soul. In the sacred language of the psyche, relationships are not random. They are assignments, soul contracts, written in the ink of the unconscious, designed not merely to comfort or please us, but to awaken us. According to Jung, what we cannot see in ourselves, we project onto others. And so, the people who enter our lives, especially those who trigger us, who challenge us, who stir something we can't explain, are often messengers of our own shadow. Through them, the universe reveals the parts of ourselves we have not yet claimed, healed, or forgiven. It's easy to see the shadow as something buried in solitude, but it's in the friction of intimacy that it truly emerges. The jealousy you feel in your partner's success, the rage that surges when someone points out your flaws, the intense need to control, to be validated, to be needed. All these reactions are invitations. They whisper, "There is something here for you to see." In this mystical dance between two psyches, we are constantly being reflected, and the more intense the emotion, the more likely it is that a deeper wound is being activated. These emotional currents are not accidents. They are archetypal signals, flowing from the unconscious into the space between two souls. Jung described this phenomenon as projection, the psyche's tendency to externalize what it cannot yet internalize. We see in the other what we refuse to face in ourselves, and so relationships become sacred rituals of mirroring, not just romantic ones, but friendships, family ties, even brief encounters with strangers. Everyone plays a role. Some reflect your light, others your unresolved pain, but all serve the same mystical purpose, to bring you back to yourself. If you pay attention to how you react to others, especially with judgment or obsession, you begin to see what your soul is longing to integrate. This understanding transforms relationships from places of blame to arenas of growth. No longer do you ask, "Why are they like this?" Instead you ask, "What is this showing me about myself?" This shift is profoundly spiritual. It invites you to reclaim your projections, to dissolve illusion, and to build relationships based on presence rather than expectation. As you begin to withdraw the shadow from the world and reintegrate it into your psyche, you experience a profound liberation. You no longer need others to behave a certain way for you to feel whole. You begin to love more freely because your love is no longer entangled in unconscious need. But this path of inner revelation is not always gentle. Often it begins with pain, the discomfort of loss, betrayal, abandonment. These too are mirrors, showing you the parts of yourself that still fear being alone, unseen, or unworthy. And so the soul, in its infinite wisdom, uses even heartbreak to guide you home. Every conflict becomes a lesson, every trigger a teacher, and just when you think you've reached your limit, life reveals the next layer, which brings us to a deeper truth, that healing is not found in resistance, but in acceptance. And now, we begin to explore how pain, when welcomed, becomes the very key to awakening. There comes a time when running is no longer an option. When distraction fails, numbing wears off, and all that remains is the ache, raw, honest, unrelenting. In this sacred stillness, the seeker stands at the threshold of true transformation. Jung taught that pain, when resisted, becomes suffering, but when embraced, it becomes a passage, a bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. Pain is not the enemy, it is the alchemist. It dissolves illusions, shatters false identities, and burns through the masks we so carefully constructed. The fire hurts, yes, but it also purifies. It makes room for the soul to finally speak. In the language of the unconscious, pain is symbolic. It carries meaning, precision, intention. The universe doesn't waste experiences. That heartbreak, that emptiness, that lingering anxiety, none of it is random. Each sensation is a message encrypted in emotion. When we stop resisting, when we allow ourselves to feel, we begin to translate these sacred signals. The spirituality hidden within the pain becomes clear. It's not here to break us. It's here to bring us back to essence. And in that moment of surrender, we realize the pain was never the problem. The problem was how we tried to escape it. This acceptance is not passive. It is active, conscious, courageous. To sit with your pain is to enter the temple of your soul. Meditation becomes more than silence. It becomes listening. Journaling becomes more than words. It becomes dialogue with your inner world. Tears become sacred offerings, and through it all, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel less fragmented. The parts of you that were once exiled, the scared child, the grieving lover, the weary wanderer, begin to come home. The universe, in its infinite mysticism, responds to authenticity, and nothing is more authentic than pain met with presence. What you once feared becomes familiar, not because it stops hurting, but because you stop resisting. You stop assigning blame to others, to fate, even to yourself. This shift marks the true turning point on the path of individuation. You realize that pain isn't a punishment, it's part of the spiritual design. The psyche doesn't evolve through avoidance, it evolves through integration. And by allowing yourself to be with what is, Rather than constantly striving to change it, you begin to transform on levels beyond the rational mind. The soul softens, the heart opens, the self emerges not in perfection but in wholeness, and so through this sacred acceptance, we prepare for a deeper act of liberation, the release of blame, the reclamation of power, the radical choice to forgive. Because once you've made peace with your pain, there's one more step to take, freeing the energy bound to the past, not by forgetting, but by taking responsibility for your own healing. This is where true freedom lives. And now, we step into the final teaching, the mystical power of forgiveness and the path of self-responsibility as the keys to inner liberation. There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the soul whispers, "It's time to let go." Not because the past didn't hurt, not because what happened was fair or easy to understand, but because holding on has become too heavy. Jung understood this weight. He saw how the human psyche binds itself to pain, looping in blame, shame, and guilt, long after the moment has passed. And yet forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is not about forgetting. It is about releasing the energetic cord that keeps your soul tied to a chapter that no longer serves your becoming. It is an act of power, a spiritual declaration. I choose freedom over resentment. Forgiveness is not a favor to the other. It's a sacred offering to yourself. It is a mystical act of inner realignment, one that says, I will not allow the past to define my identity or my future. Many resist forgiveness because they confuse it with weakness or permission. But in truth, nothing requires more courage than to look at your own wounds and choose peace instead of perpetuation. When we forgive, we reclaim the pieces of ourselves scattered in memory, in bitterness, in regret. We call them back into the self. The universe responds to this shift. Doors open, synchronicities align, and your energy, once trapped in the loop of blame, becomes available for creation, for connection, for healing. But forgiveness alone is not the full liberation. It must be paired with self-responsibility. This is the next mystical step, where the seeker stops asking, who is to blame, and starts asking, what is this teaching me? Jung emphasized that true transformation happens when we no longer project the source of our pain outward, but take ownership of our inner world. This is not about self-blame. It's about self-agency. It's about choosing to evolve rather than repeat. The path of spirituality, of individuation, of soul realization, demands this radical honesty. You begin to see your life not as a series of accidents, but as a sacred curriculum. Through self-responsibility, you stop being a victim of fate and become a co-creator with the universe. You recognize how your beliefs shaped your experiences, how your wounds attracted certain dynamics, how your silence allowed certain patterns to persist. And instead of shaming yourself, you hold it all with compassion, because now you see the full picture. You see how every wound carried a message, how every betrayal cracked open a deeper truth. And as you gather these insights, you begin to stand not just in awareness, but in wisdom. You don't just know who you are, you embody it, you live it, you radiate it. And so the journey comes full circle. The pain that once brought you to your knees becomes the ground beneath your transformation. The shadow you once feared becomes your guide. The patterns, once traps, become maps. You have forgiven, you have reclaimed, and now you are ready. Ready not just to live, but to live awake. To walk this world not as a fragmented self, but as a whole being, aligned with the mystical rhythm of the universe, attuned to the whispers of the unconscious, and anchored in the sacred truth. Your liberation was never outside you. It was always waiting within. Now tell me, what has your pain been trying to teach you? If something in this video stirred your soul, a memory, a realization, a feeling you couldn't quite name, share it in the comments. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs right now. And remember, your voice matters in this space of awakening. If this journey touched something deep within you, don't forget to subscribe to Celestial Truths and activate the notifications. That's how you make sure you never miss the next message the universe might be sending through our content. And speaking of next steps, the next video appearing on your screen will take you even further down the path of self-discovery. Click it, watch it. Let your transformation continue with reverence and light. This is Celestial Truths.